Where does the EP come from? Where does the expectation and or preference come from? This is where we back up just a little bit to give you a better understanding of how your mind works to give you that expectation or preference, okay? So your brain, en masse, is your organ of survival. Your heart is a different organ, your liver is a different organ, your kidneys are a different organ, your heart pumps the blood around your body, the liver takes the impurities and toxins out of your system, the kidneys purify the blood itself and helps you pee, etc. Your brain is an organ. Your brain is your organ of survival. Your memory helps you remember where the food and water is. Your cognition helps you figure out how to build shelter. Your imagination helps you practice mentally for future situations. Heck, even your sense of humor helps you say funny things to get people to jump into bed to propagate the species, right? So your brain is all about surviving from today into tomorrow. It always gives you things that are useful for your continued survival. Now, within that brain, you have this thing called the limbic system. It is your more primitive brain. It scans your senses and thoughts for threats. It's the one that's always there saying, is this a threat? Is this a threat? Is this a threat? It's the thing that looks down on the ground and sees, oh, a coiled something or other. Is that a snake or is that a hose? Right? It makes you jump a little bit, right? That's your limbic system in action, looking for potential threats to you so that you can survive from today into tomorrow. It initiates protective emotional responses, like when you see that hose on the ground, you think it's a snake and you jump. That's a fear response. It's a nervous twitch response. And our emotions urge us towards safety and defense. And when the limbic system fires, it shuts off your thinking brain. Your prefrontal cortex is your thinking brain. When your limbic system starts firing, your prefrontal cortex is shut down, and this is a protective system that says, we don't need to think about how fast we need to run when we see a snake in the grass, so we're going to turn this off, expend our natural resources, our energy resources for the things that we really need, which are muscles in our legs to run or our muscles in our arms to fight. We don't need to think about how to get away from that snake to be able to get away from it. This is a survival mechanism. But the problem is, in the last 150 years, we went from being able to run from the snake to get away from danger to now a lot of our problems and a lot of our emotional issues are arising in situations where we need to be able to think to get out of them. So it's worse that our limbic system shuts off our thinking brain, because then that just prolongs our suffering, prolongs our problem of being able to get out of our limbic response. Well, we're going to help you fix that, okay? Now, in this whole process of scanning for threats, where you walk around every day, every moment of every day, your limbic system is scanning, oh, is this car going to hit me? Oh, is this person a threat over here? Oh, what does that headline mean to me, right? There is something else that's missing in that equation. When your brain is your organ of survival, your limbic system is scanning for threats, another question must be asked. Well, a threat to what exactly? What is it that I'm supposed to be protecting if I'm the limbic system, right? What is the laundry list of things that I need to be protecting? I need to understand who I am and what I am to understand what's going to be a threat to me, right? And so this is where we've created our mind's self, or our mind has created a self for us to defend. This is the critical definition of all that is you that must be protected from all threats. It's a physiological requirement for survival. Now, the function of the self in the brain itself is found in multiple areas. Basically, your mind's self is the list of stuff that your mind believes makes you, you. It is inclusive of your body, which is why you automatically dodge when a baseball or something comes flying at your head and you duck. That's your limbic system in action, in protecting you from a potential threat, right? It's why we jump when that big clap of thunder comes. It's that place of, I need to potentially move to get out of here if something big is about to fall on me with a big noise coming from behind me, right? That's the whole limbic system in action. But your body is hardwired into that system, but your body isn't the only thing that gets wired into yourself that must need protecting. The brain also maps onto the self the things that are familiar to you in your life. Now, this starts with a Jim Cohn study from UVA, who really opened up the world of psychology and understanding our subconscious processes through this potential, or through this whole string of studies. But basically what he did is he started with a group of folks who put him in an fMRI machine, and he was going to basically give him a zap of electricity on their ankle, and he's going to measure the fear in their response. And he wanted to test, originally, what holding hands might do to the brain's response of a threat to self. And so what he did is he put the glasses on the person, he gave him a flash of light, he waited to watch the brain in that instance after he gave him a flash of light, and then he administered a zap to the ankle of the people who were in the fMRI machine. So what they got was what they expected to get: flash of light, pause to watch the brain reacted in fear. Holy shit, here comes the zap on my ankle, right? And so they were able to identify the fear center of the brain. They were able to identify and map this portions of the brain that connected with self. A threat to self is an ankle zap, is what that is, and so the brain reacts accordingly. Well, then they did a second run, and they said, okay, well, now we're going to bring this stranger in, and we're going to put the ankle zapper on the stranger. And we're going to give you the flash of light. We're going to watch your brain, but they're going to zap the stranger. So what they did, gave them the flash of light, watched the brain in reaction, and they got exactly what they expected there as well. No fear, right? Because there's no potential threat to self. They thought self was just the body at that moment. So yeah, you're not going to zap your body. You're going to zap somebody else's body. So no fear should be the result. No fear was the result. Now, they did an interesting third portion of that experiment, which is what opened up everything for the understanding of how the human mind worked, the mind self, etc., which is they brought a third person in who was a familiar to the person in the fMRI machine, a good friend, a loved one, a family member, whatever it was, is what science calls a familiar. So they gave him they gave him the flash of light in the glasses. They paused to watch the subject's brain, and then they zapped the loved one. And what they got, they didn't expect from the results of the study, because what they got was an exact reading of the first run that they did when they were zapping the person's own body. They got the exact same readings from the people in the fMRI when you were zapping somebody who is a loved one, who was familiar to you. So this showed a couple of things. One, that it wasn't just the body that it gets a fear reaction or emotional reactions based to potential threats to self, but if there was someone else that was a familiar to you, you had emotional reaction to that person as well, but then they also were mapped onto the same exact areas of the brain that defined your mind self. There was no difference between the brain scans. They couldn't tell them apart. And so what Jim Cohn proved was that other people can become mapped onto your mind's sense of self and thus be on the laundry list of things that must be protected for you to, for your brain to work its charter, which is to survive from one moment into the next, or survive your definition of self from today into tomorrow. Well, that now simply includes people who are other than you as well. Now, the interesting that happened there is that another business school student, business school professor, Tiffany Burnett White at UIUC, then proved that self-brand connection, SBC, also plays into that same function and also connects with the same areas of the brain that define our body self and our other people around us self, in that we can get attached to brands such as Apple Android, such as San Francisco 49ers versus Dallas Cowboys, such as whatever your favorite brand of whatever is. When a bad news about that brand comes to you, you react in the same way as having a personal attack or personal loss. So she showed that other ideas can become attached to your sense of self and thus drive emotional reactions based on the same one equation of emotion that we talked about previously. Your expectation or preference about something versus your perception about something. Well, now if you love Apple and all of a sudden the newest Apple product sucks, or somebody's saying something in the news about Apple, or you have some bad news about Apple or whatever, that perception is going to be created in your mind. That's going to be an imbalance, and you're going to have a negative emotion about that Apple thing in your mind, or your Dallas Cowboys thing in your mind is going to be creating a negative reaction from the same basic function of your nervous system. The same basic function that creates emotions about your body and you and the people you love can also create emotional reactions about the things that you prefer including Sam Harris did a few studies on politics and religion, and you don't even have to go very much farther than Facebook to see the emotional reactions that people have about their politics or their religion or defending one of those in an argument, right? Emotional reactions are, of course, associated with politics and religion and the things that you connect to mentally that then drive your mind into a tizzy when something doesn't match your expectation or preference about that one thing, okay? Other ideas of self can be attached to your mind's definition of you, which includes, your cultural heritage, your career or job, or whatever you do for a living, the things that you've done in life, your accomplishments, your scarring memories in life can become a potential existence or definition of who you are if you put those things on as a piece of identity, right? All of those things can become a portion of your sense of self, which then creates an expectation or preference about that self thing that you then must defend. And so your mind's idea of you can get all muddled up and clouded up with all of these various things that you get attached to in your life, and that creates another instance of potential unrest or imbalance in your mind's existence with the more things that fall onto your self map that you identify as being a portion of your life, right? And of course, the more stuff that winds up on your self map, the more things are that can ruin your day. Well, this is where the expectation or preference comes from in your mind for your equation of emotion. Every one of those individual things has an expectation or preference automatically assigned to it. And the rule comes from homeostasis. Everything on the self map must be held at status quo or increased in value, or we're going to have a problem. So in your body, I am my body, the baseball comes flying at your head. That is a perception that your body may take a devaluation or may take an injury if you don't duck. And so almost involuntarily, you duck out of the way of the baseball that's flying at your head because your equation of motion was your expectation or preference be that your body be held at status quo or increase in value. And there's a potential baseball that could be about to conflict with that. And so you take action. The emotional reaction is the involuntary reaction of the startle reflex and the motions of the muscles to move your head out of the way to bring a balance to your equation of emotion. Well, that stuff occurs as well on every individual thing that is a part of your self map, down to the things that you get attached to in the moment. A project at work, right? You're working on a project at work, and all of a sudden you have an expectation or preference that the project at work go well, or that you be seen as a good projecteer or whatever the hell it is. Then all of a sudden a perception comes in that's either good or bad about that thing, and all of a sudden you have an emotional reaction about that project at work. And it is either making or ruining your day at that point. Seems a little silly to me, but that's how the human mind is wired. It's how it's been working for the last number of thousands of years. But it doesn't have to be how it works. It doesn't have to be how your mind is filled. You can actually turn that stuff down and turn it off to a certain extent to where you don't sweat the small stuff and everything's small stuff, right?